And welcome back to the second half as we have under a minute to play for St. Francis, and that shot no good. Rebound Austin Jones, and Jones is going to be fouled, and that is going to send Mount Vernon back to the free throw line. They lead by 12 with 49.2 seconds to go, and Austin Jones going to go back to the line for Mount Vernon, as he has 10 points, and he's looking to potentially make it 12 points, barring these two free throws. And the first free throw is on the way, no good, too strong. So, now for St. Francis, number 24, Ridley Zolman checks into the game. Has not played at all today, or tonight I should say, but getting playing time late. And that second free throw by Jones is good. Also number 10, Tyler Smith checking back into the game for St. Francis. And Smith now going to fire a two, no. And now St. Francis, nice hustle there by Austin Jones. And it's going to stay with Mount Vernon as they lead by 13. Isaac White checking back into the game for Mount Vernon, replacing the freshman Ryan Wolf. And Alex Johnson will inbound for the Cougars. And Johnson does. He gets it back to Jacob Paul. So Paul, guarded by Zolman. Paul across the timeline. Has a 7-second difference, shot the game clock. And now Paul, closely guarded by Zolman, with 18 seconds to go. So Mount Vernon going to win this game. Now Paul, now Jones. Jones gets it back to Paul. Paul with 3 to shoot. Paul, baseline jumper, got it. And Mount Vernon goes up by 15 with 5 seconds to go. And now Tyler Smith going to fire a 3 at the buzzer, and that's no good. And now a 3, well, nope. And Lance Dollison fired a 3 at the buzzer, and that's no good. How about that? Mount Vernon is victorious tonight, 85-70 over St. Francis. So Mount Vernon with a huge upset over the number 15 team in the nation. Mount Vernon was ranked 20th, so if they can beat, now remember, the next polls come out next Wednesday, so if they are able to beat both Taylor and Bethel, Taylor on Saturday, Bethel next Tuesday night, Mount Vernon more than likely would be back up in the top 10. They should definitely jump back up inside the top 15 with the upset win over St. Francis tonight. So Mount Vernon coming away with a huge win tonight. And we want to get you some updated Crossroads League scores that we have. And we are going to check Spring Arbor and Grace. Now Spring Arbor in a barn burner. Spring Arbor defeats Grace 82-81 as DeWilt with 20 points, but Brandon Durnell 28 points on the night for Spring Arbor. Jeff Beckman coming away with 15 points. Jarrett Sons leading the way for Grace with 21, Deaton with 17, and Jennings with 16. So Spring Arbor comes back and defeats Grace tonight. And with 9:14 to go in the game, Taylor is up 76-50 over Goshen. So Taylor is going to go to the 8th seed with their win, well, barring a Huntington win tonight. And of course, so we do have that final score for you as Indiana Wesleyan victorious tonight, 97-64. And for Indiana Wesleyan, Kyle Mangus with 13 points, as Seth Maxwell had 18. And Indiana Wesleyan victorious tonight in Huntington. So with the loss, Huntington's going to fall to 5-10 in the Crossroads League. With the win, Taylor is going to jump to 6 and 9. So Taylor jumps to the 8th seed with that win tonight. And as we said, Spring Arbor defeating Grace 82-81 in a barn burner. And of course, we will get you updated standings here momentarily of the games that have gone final tonight. And we will try and get you those games. And of course, as we said, Indiana Wesleyan victorious tonight. So Indiana Wesleyan remains the 1 seed. They go to 13 and 2, 23 and 4 in the Crossroads League. With the win tonight, actually with the Grace loss, Grace will fall to 9 and 6. Grace is still the 3 seed. St. Francis falls to 8 and 7. So St. Francis is 1 game behind Grace for the 3 seed. Spring Arbor goes to 8 and 7. So Spring Arbor jumps into a 2-way tie with St. Francis for the 4 seed. And Mount Vernon goes to 7 and 8. They go to 19 and 8 overall. They end the 4-game losing streak. They go to 3 and 17 overall versus St. Francis. St. Francis ends a 10-0 streak of beating Mount Vernon at home. And of course, Taylor, with their win over Goshen, they will go to 6 and 9. So Mount Vernon, with their win tonight, as we said, goes to 7 and 8. And Spring Arbor, with their upset win over Grace, will go into a 2-way tie with St. Francis for the 4 seed, and they both will trail Grace by 1 game for the 3 seed. And barring the Bethel game, if Bethel loses tonight, Mount Vernon would be tied with Bethel for the 5 and the 6 seed, as Taylor would fall, or actually Taylor would be the 8th seed. But we'll try and give you those accurate standings and results the minute that we have them. And we're going to try and get you here. We're going to try and get you the stats. So we can tell you, yes, that Marion is victorious tonight. They defeated Bethel 90-81. So a huge win there by Bethel, or a huge win there by Marion. So that is going to allow Mount Vernon to go into a 2-way tie with Bethel. So St. Francis falls to 8 and 7. Spring Arbor goes to 8 and 7. Marion's victorious tonight. Marion goes to 12 and 2, and they have won 6 in a row. And St. Francis falls to 8 and 7. Spring Arbor will go to 8 and 7. So Spring Arbor is going to be tied with St. Francis for the 4 seed, and they both will trail Grace by 1 game. Grace will fall to 9 and 6. And St. Francis and Spring Arbor will be 8 and 7. So the top part of the standings, especially for the 3, 4, 5, and 6, are all really, really close heading into the games this weekend. And of course, Goshen is going to fall to 0 and 15 in the Crossroads League. They're going to fall to 4 and 23 overall. So while we're waiting for the updated standings, let's talk about statistics tonight between these two teams. And boy, it was just a powerhouse shooting in the second half, as we said. Jevin Knox, Isaac White and Jevin Knox coming away with 22 points for the Cougars. Jacob Paul on the night coming away with 11 points. Eric McLaughlin with 6 points, and that was earlier on in the game. 2 of 2 from three-point range. And Austin Jones coming away with 12 points on the night, and Alex Johnson coming away with 9 points. David Delahunty with 2 points earlier on in the game. And Mount Vernon had 6 turnovers the first half, and they had 5 in the second half. So Mount Vernon had 11 turnovers the whole entire game. St. Francis in the first half had 3, and they only had 2 in the second half. So St. Francis had 5 turnovers the whole entire game. Mount Vernon had 11. So your leading scorers for St. Francis are going to be Antoine Cushenberry with 19 points. And Connor Lottenheiser was right behind him with 18. So Antoine Cushenberry with 19, Connor Lottenheiser with 18 points, David Asia with 6 points, Austin Compton only with 2 points. Now remember, that game in Mount Vernon, January 14th, Austin Compton had 31, and he was held to only 2 points the whole entire game. And Jeffrey Reynolds with 11 points, Jalen Malls coming away with 10 points, and James Anderson coming away with 4 points. So those are your statistics of tonight's game. And boy, Jevin Knox and Isaac White, boy, they were just on fire, especially in the second half. Now remember, Mount Vernon was down by 6 earlier in the second half, and they just, I mean, St. Francis just stopped making shots in the second half, and that allowed for Mount Vernon to just come out, and I'll give Mount Vernon credit. They played extremely hard the whole entire game, and they were able to knock down the shots when it counted the most. And they were able to get a huge win and an upset win as far as that goes, defeating St. Francis only for the 3rd time in program history, and I believe for the first time under head coach Jared Ronay. So that is a huge win for Mount Vernon. And as we said, as I alluded to earlier, Spring Arbor upsetting Grace tonight, 82-81. Indiana Wesleyan, no problem, defeating Huntington 97-64, and Marion defeating Bethel 90-81. So the updated look at the standings looks like this. Indiana Wesleyan on a 3-game losing streak. They are the 1 seed at 13-2. Marion's the 2 seed at 12-3. Marion's won 6 in a row. Grace, with their loss, falls to 9-6 in the Crossroads League. So Grace is the 3 seed by 1 game. St. Francis and Spring Arbor tied for the 4 and the 5 seed. Mount Vernon and Bethel tied for the 6 and the 7 seed at 7-8. Bethel's on a 4-game losing streak, and that is going to be a huge game on Saturday for Mount Vernon. If Mount Vernon wins on Saturday, if they win on Saturday and defeat Taylor, and if Bethel loses this weekend to Huntington, then Mount Vernon would climb up to the 6th seed. If Bethel defeats Huntington on Saturday and Mount Vernon defeats Taylor, Bethel and Mount Vernon would still be tied for the 6th and the 7th seed going into the game against each other next Tuesday night in Ariel Arena. And with a Spring Arbor loss on Saturday against Indiana Wesleyan, Mount Vernon would be in a 3-way tie for the 5 seed with Spring Arbor and Bethel. And with a St. Francis loss on Saturday at Grace, then Mount Vernon would be in a 4-way tie for the 4 seed going into the game against Bethel. So Mount Vernon definitely needed this win tonight, and I'm glad they were able to get a huge win. And they go to 7-8 in the Crossroads League. Bethel falls to Bethel falls tonight to Marion. So Bethel goes to 7-8 as well. So Mount Vernon and Bethel tied for the 6th and the 7th seed. Remember, Bethel won the first meeting, so Bethel would hold the tiebreaker between Mount Vernon, and as it stood right now, Taylor, with their win tonight over Goshen, would be the 8th seed. Huntington would fall out of playoff contention by a game as Huntington falls to 5-10. And Taylor, as it stands now, would travel to Indiana Wesleyan in the first round Wednesday night, February 26th. Mount Vernon would travel to Marion. Bethel would travel to Grace. And Spring Arbor would travel to St. Francis as it stands right now. Now, obviously, a lot can still happen, and as I alluded to, Mount Vernon could get a lot of help. They could get a lot of help from the teams that are above them this weekend. And even with a Bethel win over Huntington, Mount Vernon would need a St. Francis loss against Grace and a Spring Arbor loss versus Indiana Wesleyan. And that would allow Mount Vernon into a four-way tie for the 4 seed going into the game against Bethel next Tuesday night, into the second to last game of the season. So Mount Vernon is not out of it by any stretch. They still could get a home playoff game for the second year in a row, but they desperately need Bethel, Spring Arbor, and St. Francis to lose a couple of more games, and Mount Vernon could climb right back up and be right back in it in no time. And of course, the Goshen game is unofficial as they had a 7:30 start time tonight, but we will try and get you an updated look at the stats of that game to tell you who is winning that game. With 3:41 to go, Taylor is up by 29. They lead 90-61, and of course Goshen is just that bad. So Goshen is going to fall to 0-15 in the Crossroads League. Goshen's going to fall to 0-15, 4-23 overall. Huntington, as I alluded to earlier, falls to 5-10. And Taylor, with their win, they're going to go to 6-9. They will end a 2-game losing streak. And Mount Vernon, I tell you what, if Taylor plays on Saturday the way they are playing Goshen tonight, Mount Vernon might be in for a fight in Ariel Arena on Saturday. And that is going to do it for announcing men's basketball for the 2019/2020 year, and I hope you definitely enjoyed it. You were able to learn something, and I'm definitely looking forward to next season, continuing to cheer on our MVNU Cougars. And don't forget the women's game coming up tomorrow night. I'll be with you on the call of that game, the absolute last game that I will be announcing in the 2019/20 school year, as Mount Vernon has 2 home games coming up this week, well, this next week as far as that goes, against Taylor this weekend on Saturday at 1 and 3, and then Bethel on senior night next Tuesday and Wednesday night, February 18th and 19th. And then, of course, I'll be hitting the road to Grace to round out the regular season on next Saturday, February 22nd. And so I'm definitely looking forward to that game. And real quick, just to look at the women's standings heading into tomorrow night. Mount Vernon in a must-win situation. Remember, Grace plays Spring Arbor tomorrow, and with a Grace win plus a Huntington with a Huntington loss and a Mount Vernon win, Mount Vernon would trail Huntington by 1 game for the 6th seed, but Huntington holds the tiebreaker since they swept the series versus Mount Vernon. But don't forget, Indiana Wesleyan and St. Francis, I could see St. Francis losing 3 out of the last 4 games, and Indiana Wesleyan could easily jump up to the 3 seed. So Mount Vernon desperately needs a win tomorrow night. We hope our Lady Cougars can get the job done. Remember, the last game, Taylor Gregory had 15 points and 13 rebounds on Saturday against Huntington with a double-double. But Sage Brannon, the sophomore that transferred from Ashland University, had 27 points, an all-time career high, and we're desperately going to need that tomorrow night if we expect to beat St. Francis. And so Mount Vernon desperately needs a win tomorrow night. They're not out of it by any stretch. Of course, Goshen and Bethel trail Spring Arbor by 1 game. So if Spring Arbor can pull a huge upset over Grace, that would help Mount Vernon. And if Huntington loses tomorrow night, that would help as well. And of course, Indiana Wesleyan is playing tomorrow night, and Indiana Wesleyan desperately needing a win. And remember, Indiana Wesleyan plays Huntington tomorrow night. So Indiana Wesleyan needs a win in that game. Grace, of course, is taking on Bethel tomorrow night. And Taylor, of course, is taking on Goshen. And Marion's taking on Bethel. Grace is taking on Spring Arbor. I stand corrected, so I apologize for that. So, we desperately need a win tomorrow night. It could happen. There's a long way to go, but thanks so much for tuning in with me tonight for what was a really good game tonight. As we said, Mount Vernon victorious by a final score of 85-70. Don't forget to join me on the women's game tomorrow night. I will be with you on the call of that game. Pre-game will start at 6:45. Thanks so much for tuning in with me tonight. Have a great rest of your night, and God bless.